I was still trying to heal and still trying to comprehend everything. And so as I'm getting all of these texts and calls, I just started becoming kind of angry.
Hello, you are listening to NPE Stories. This is a podcast where NPEs can share their story. I am your host, Lily, and I found out I was an NPE through an ancestry DNA test that changed my life forever. NPE is a term that stands for Not Parent Expected or Non-Paternal Event. This means that one or more of our parents are not who we believe them to be. NPE Stories is a podcast where NPEs can share their story of what their original family was like, how they found out they were an NPE, and what their journey has been like since the day they found out. Welcome to episode 107. Today I am speaking with Jennifer Lopez. Hi, Jennifer.
Hello.
Hi. We are going to call this episode Jennifer Lopez's Story, because we had another Jennifer 1 or 2 seasons ago. And where am I speaking with you from? Where are you in the United States?
I'm in California, West Coast. Yeah.
Hence why the Pacific time you sent me.
Yes.
We had a snowstorm last night, so California is sounding
It's
so much
actually
nicer.
pretty nice and sunny today, so sorry to rub it in.
No, I love it. I love you. You picked a good place to live.
Yeah.
Okay, Miss Jennifer, we're going to make space for your story today.
Wonderful. Thank
you.
So
why don't you? Yeah, thank you. And why don't you just go ahead and start at the beginning? And I'm just going to kind of let you talk today.
Okay. So growing up, I would tell everybody, when they would ask me what nationality I am, I'd say, oh, I'm Filipino and white. And sometimes people would question me, like, you're not Hispanic at all? And I would answer, no, my dad's white. And one time a girl said, I don't think you're half white. And I said, okay, well, what does she know? Apparently, she could tell something that I had no clue of. So anyhow, going on, my family was a typical military family. We moved a lot when I was little. I was born in the Philippines in 1977, and my mom had 2 other sons already. My dad, James, was such a loving man. He took my brothers in without questioning who they belonged to. He just knew that my mom didn't have a father for them, and he took them in and adopted them immediately. So he was there from day one. My dad was the best provider. He was a good teacher, a loving man to the family, strict, but he was still very loving. My parents went on to have my little brother, James Jr., and there was the 4 of us. When I was about 11 months old, that's when we came to the U.S., or my dad brought us back to the U.S., and we lived in California. And until the age of 5, we moved back to the Philippines again, and we lived off base near Clark Air Force Base, where I was born. And we lived there until I was about 9 years old. Then we were stationed in New Jersey for about a year. We moved back to California, and I've lived here ever since. I was a young mother. I had my first son at the age of 17. I moved out of my mom and dad's house. And I was one of those rebellious teenagers that wanted to be an adult, as soon as I could. And that's what I did. But my parents weren't too far away. My mom and I weren't able to get along when I lived with her. So when I moved out, we had much better of a bond after that. I think she understood my choices to be out of the house. I worked a lot. I did struggle some, but I never lacked help without my parents. So I ended up having another son at 19. I met my husband, Nick. He was also the dad of 2 beautiful little girls. He and I had, he had his 2 girls. I had my 2 sons, and then together we had our daughter. So there was 5 of us. So going into my NPE discovery story is, I received a Facebook request, a friend request around 2012. And it was some random gentleman named Hector Rivera. And I ignored it. I was like, that's weird, because you always get these spam requests. And I didn't think anything of it. So I ignored it and went on. I did see if there was a message, and it was basically by Bible scripture, and I just thought it was a spam. So then months later, I received another friend request from a lady named Daira Rivera, and she seemed like a wholesome person. I just looked at it and I just said, I tugged at it and I said, do I know you? And she messaged me back on Messenger and she says, you don't know me, but her message back to me was in kind of broken English. So I really thought it was another spam, but she says, my husband believes that he's your father. And mind you, this is back in 2012 or 13. And she says, he believes he's your father. He's a loving man. He's wonderful to me and my family. And he had cancer and he wanted to meet you before he passes away, is what the message said.
Wow.
I remember telling my parents about this happening when that occurred. And I think my dad said something along the lines of, yeah, there's some crazy guy in Florida who tried calling us here. Don't believe it for one bit, is what my dad, James, said. And I said, oh, okay. So I thought for sure, we'll just let that go. Moving forward to about 2016, I was coaching cheerleading at the time. My kids were getting bigger, and I had one cheerleader who, she was already older. She grew up and she was working a job at a pizza place. And she gets a call and she's like, hey, Jen, she's like, some guy called me here at work asking for you. And I don't know how he got her phone number out of all of my friends on Facebook. Maybe she wasn't blocked, but he was able to contact her. And she said the same thing. She says he thinks he thinks he's your biological dad. And I was like, oh no, don't feed into that. I said, next time he calls, you let him know that you're going to call the police. So I just said, don't even, but she says, but Jen, he's such a nice man. She's like, even if it is a scam, she's like, he's so believable and he knows your mom. And she called my mom by her name, Imelda. She goes, he knows your mom, Imelda, and he knows your brother or your dad, Dennis. And Dennis is not my dad's name. Dennis is my brother. But that's what she said. And it made me really think, oh, no, this is somebody fishing.
Mm-hmm.
So it did pique my interest because somebody's obviously trying really hard to get in touch with me. So she says, Jen, I took his phone number down. She's like, you can take it or you can throw it away. She's like, but like I said, he sounds like a nice, genuine person. And she said the same thing, that he says he's dying of cancer and he wanted to meet you first before he died. So again, I'm thinking, this is crazy. There's no way. So I took the phone number down and I just kind of sat, and stewed and listened and thought about, what should I do? And I talked to my husband about this. And one day I just went to my mom and, she was out front in her front yard. She lived 5 houses down from me and she was watering the grass. And I brought it up to her real casually. I'm like, hey, Mom, there's some man named Hector that keeps trying to reach me. And he says he's possibly my biological father and that he could be dying from cancer. And my mom, she just retorted really fast and she was very angry about it. She says, well, then let him die. And I thought, that is not a good response, number one. And number two, if it wasn't true, you would definitely say, no, there's no way that could be, that's impossible. You would think. Instead, my mom's answer is let him die was kind of really, I just didn't understand where that came from. And it was kind of, angry. And that really piqued my interest again. So I let it go. time passed again, and I was in school. I'm in medical school, and we're discussing blood types at this point. I know that I'm an O blood type. And I asked my parents, I'm like, what blood type are you? I know my dad's blood type because he'd always say, oh, I'm a blood type B positive, just like my attitude is what my dad James would say. And one day I asked my mom, I'm like, what's your blood type? And she kind of steps back and she's like, why? And I'm like, Mom, just asking. We're doing a blood drive at school. And, I'm just curious. And she's like, well, I'm B positive, and they won't want my blood anyways because I have hypertension, is what she said. I thought, okay. So at that point, I'm really curious because I know I have a different blood type than both of my parents. So once again, I'm just kind of watching my mom's body language when she's answering these questions, and she seems to be so uncomfortable. So I'm like, okay, well, I did look into it, and you can have a different blood type than both of your parents, but it's not very common, I guess, from what I understand. But at this time, I'm really curious. So I go back because I don't delete the friend request from either Hector or his wife. And I'm curious, and I'm at work. I'm working, and I'm on my break in the lunchroom. And I pull up Hector's Facebook again, and I look at I kind of snoop through his pictures because it's wide open. It's not blocked. And then I come across one of his daughters, his youngest daughter. And to me, she looks just like me. So like a creeper, I snapped a shot of her picture. I screenshotted it, and I came home and I showed it to my husband. And I said, look, what do you think of this picture? And his jaw dropped, and he's like, who is that? She looks like you. And it pretty much confirmed my thoughts. It was hard to accept, but then when I clicked back onto his messenger, I found out that he had sent me multiple messages, and you don't see them unless you actually accept their friend request or you go into the messenger. And that's when I saw his messages to me, explaining the scenario of what happened when he met my mom, how he came looking for me. And, I was 36 when I found him, or we discovered each other. It was very upsetting when I found out. I cried for days and days. And I was upset with my parents for not telling me. But Hector, was such a patient man. He just had like the most patience and forgiveness in his heart that he said, it's okay. Your parents took you and raised you well, and look at you now. You're doing great. You had a wonderful life. And he was able to get me to calm down. I guess it was most upsetting when he showed me my own baby picture with my mom's handwriting on the back of it. And that was pretty confirming. I just cried a lot in those first few days.
He had a picture of you from your mom.
My mom gave him a picture. It was actually when we lived in New Jersey that she mailed him a picture of me. She found out where he lived in Florida, and I don't know how she got his address, but she was able to send him a picture. But we only lived in New Jersey for the 1 year. And then when we moved back to California, she never had any contact again with him. So a little background on my mom. She didn't even finish grade school. She grew up very, very poor in the Philippines. She was one of 6 children, and only my grandmother raising her. And so she wanted to help out too. As poor as they were in the province, it's third world country where she grew up. So she had my oldest brother, Joel, and my grandmother took care of him. And then she moved towards the base, near the base. And then she was pregnant with my brother, Dennis, my older brother. She had him too. That man left her basically with a son. And she didn't trust a lot of men for a while. She met Hector, and Hector was a lot younger than my mom. I believe he was like 4 years younger than my mom. He was only 19. And she met him. He was military, and they were dating. And she ended up pregnant with me. And I guess when she brought that to Hector's attention, he said, I can't have a child right now. I'm still a child myself, basically, is how my mom put it. And he said he couldn't do that. And he knew my mom had my brother, Dennis. He didn't know about my oldest brother. And, my mom just said, okay, well, if you can't deal with it, then I'll deal with it myself. She also knew my dad, James, already. And I guess when he would come to the Philippines, he was a pilot in the Air Force. He would talk with her and they would hang out, I guess. I don't know the whole gist of it, but he would be there and they met and he fell for my mom. And I believe she said that knowing she was pregnant, he accepted it. And he's always wanted children. He did have a daughter here in the US. She lived in Michigan. And that his mom, his relationship with her, he supported her, but the mom didn't want him to have anything to do with her. But, he was loving to her anyhow. But he accepted my mom and her two sons because she let him know that not only did she have my brother Dennis, she had another son that lived in the province with my grandma. Immediately he said, bring him to me and we're going to be a family. He married my mom 2 months before I was born. And that's where it started. And I was his child. His name was on my birth certificate. And I really thought, he was my dad. And he thought he was my dad too, because when I finally had the nerve to approach them about it, after I was able to calm down, I went to both of them and I sat down with them at their dining room table and I said, Mom, Dad, I said, I know the truth about Hector. And no matter what, it's not going to change my feelings for you both. We're going to be okay. Nothing's going to change anything whatsoever. I said, I love you both. I appreciate everything you've done for me. But here I am, 36 years old. It's not like I'm going to disown them. It's not like I can run away. I'm just letting them know I know the truth. And my dad looks at me, bold face, and he says, what are you talking about? Are you talking about this crazy guy in Florida again? I'm like, Dad, I know the truth. He denied it. He denied it. And my mom, she looked at me and she's like, what are you talking about? She, again, doesn't want to admit it. So the very next day, my mom says, I need a ride to the store. She never drove. She never had a license and never drove. So I said, okay. I pick her up. And on our way, as soon as we left the driveway, she says, Hector is your father. She admitted it to me. And she told me the whole story on how he didn't want a child. He wasn't ready. It pretty much matched what Hector had to say. Yeah, it was hard hearing it come from my mom because it was concrete at that point, also, outside of seeing the picture, I got the truth from her as well. But she said, we didn't want to come out with the truth. She said she didn't want to come out with the truth until my dad, James, passed away. So a little story about my dad here. My dad, James, he was very sick. He was actually very diagnosed with Agent Orange from the military. And he had so many different ailments. He had diabetes, congestive heart failure, hypertension, you name it. He had a lot of different ailments. And so he was sick, and my mom took care of him. And she says, I didn't want to tell you the truth until, your dad died. And because it would hurt him to know, that I told you. And I said, Mom, it's okay. She says, yeah, but he wanted you to only be his. And I said, I get that. Mm-hmm. And I totally do. I still do. So, in respect to my dad, I just kept it a secret. Or not a secret, but I just, any relationship I had developed with Hector, I kept it away from my dad. Mm-hmm. So, the very next year, I flew to Florida with my husband and my youngest daughter, Karina. We all flew to Florida and we met him. And he is a little man. He is only 5'2", and I'm taller than that. And I'm taller than my mom. She was a little lady. She was only 4'11". And I still, despite hearing it from my mom, despite, everything, I still wanted a DNA test. When we got to Florida, we did a DNA test. It took days to get the results, but he set it up. Hector set it up. And on that day, I don't remember, I think it was 4 days later, because we spent a week in Florida. We got the results, and I was 99.9991% his daughter. And I already knew it, but again, you cry because it's like more and more evidence that James is not my dad. And so it hurts, it hurts because you feel like you lived a lie, that you were betrayed, and I hurt so many different ways. Like, could I have known Hector as a young daughter? Could I have been, in his family? Would things have been different? Not that I deny that I didn't have a good upbringing. Like I said, my mom and I weren't close. And my dad was in the military, so he was gone a lot. And when I find out, my dad, Hector, he was a family man, a big time family man. He even coached softball with, for my sister. So it's like we had a lot in common right off the bat. He was a coach. I was coaching cheerleader. So I guess I still was having a hard time believing everything, because you just don't want to. At some point, you kind of just want to not believe it's real. It's hard to fathom the whole thing when, you're on our side of the story. And, when I discovered that Hector, shortly after I was born, and he kind of just couldn't find my mom, or he lost that relationship with my mother, he met a lady in Panama, Miss Daira, who would be my stepmother. And he married her, and she already had 3 children. And I thought, that is like beyond me, that you didn't want to be with my mom because she had a son and your child on the way. But then you meet a lady and she's already got 3 children, and you take them on. And I think it was maybe his, guilt or something. I don't know. But they ended up having a beautiful, beautiful family. They do have a beautiful family. Their relationship is amazing. He was a great dad to all 3 of his children there. And it shows, like, everybody there, everyone in Florida loves him, Panama, Puerto Rico. So Hector's a Puerto Rican man. I actually still had a grandmother alive when I met him. Her name was Juanita Rivera, and I got to meet her. They're Puerto Ricans, but they're very light-skinned Puerto Rican people with freckles, light, fair skin. And I think that's why it was believable that I was half white, because they're not dark skinned, they don't have the curly hair. So the whole time, it was believable to me that I was half white. When I met Hector, it was July 13th of 2016. We kept talking. I got to meet my sister at that time. They were very sweet. Everybody was kind and loving. They accepted me. They took me in. But they kind of started overwhelming me. And I don't know if everybody else felt this way, but it was already like a shock when they became my family. But then they would text me, and they love FaceTime. They love to FaceTime. And they just wanted to meet me more and more. They just wanted to know everything about me and my children. And it was great. But then it was just overbearing at some time. Sometimes I would just constantly, I'm getting calls from Daida, my sister, calls and texts from Hector. And I was just like, I was still trying to heal and still trying to comprehend everything. And so as I'm getting all of these texts and calls, I just started becoming kind of angry about everything, because I would be driving in the car, and sometimes I'd have my mom, and I'd get a text and she'd see it on the car, on the screen in my car.
Oh,
And
yeah.
there's no way I wanted to hurt anybody. I just wanted to keep it, as my thing with them. And my mom discovered, oh, you're talking with them, and you're developing a relationship, which my mom was okay with. She never said that she had a problem with it, but I wanted to protect my dad, James. I didn't want to hurt him. So I ended up, little by little, I would tell my brothers. I told each brother one at a time. And my oldest brother, Joel, says that he somewhat remembered my mom dating Hector. He remembered him. When he was a little boy, he remembered Hector coming around. But anyhow, it was hard to bring it up. Every time I would tell my brothers, the truth about me having a different dad, they just kind of, okay. And they would just walk away from it. And they never really said anything. They're not big on, oh, what else do you know? They're guys. They don't want to know a whole lot of detail. But my mom was embarrassed. My mom was so embarrassed because she felt like people would think wrong of her. They would think that she was, who knows what. And she, to protect her, I didn't want to, make her sound like a bad person. She was doing what she did to give us the best life. And that's what her goal was. And she did that. She gave us the best life. So I wasn't angry with my mom anymore at all. I let it go, and I said, Mom, I forgive you. You did what you had to do. And I totally understand. I was understanding with her, and we hugged it out. And little by little, when I'd hang out with my mom, she would tell me a little more stories about what was happening, or how it all went down. She would tell me her memories of Hector. And, it was nice to hear her, tell me the stories. But she says, we never can take away what your dad did to it for us. And I never would. My dad was amazing. He flew a lot. He was gone a lot when we were little, but we never once were in need. We never sacrificed. We never were hungry. We always had a roof over our head. So I'm going to fast forward. We're back to where I'm like listening or getting all these calls, and I kind of started shying away from my family in Florida. I felt guilt a lot in my heart, and every time they would call me, I just kept feeling just sad for my dad here, because my dad's health here was, plummeting, going down. He was just in and out of the hospital, and I couldn't help but feel terrible every time they would call and just want to talk and get to know me more and more. And here I am, worried, sick that my dad's going to die. And, it was just so hard. It was difficult because, you're going through these emotions here, and their emotions there were excitement and happy. And we want you to come back to Florida. My sister lives in Georgia, actually. My youngest one. She's like, I want you to come to Georgia. And, I did. I made a trip there. I met my grandma there. I did a lot. And that's where I think also guilt just kept, it's like a tug of war between wanting to be happy with them and then being guilty for my dad here and his health declining. And it was just something I was like having to battle over and over again. And that takes a toll on you. It takes a toll on your health, your soul, your heart. And I was just being tugged in so many directions. And for a while, I stopped actually answering a lot of their calls, because in 2019, in June, my dad died.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And yeah, thank you. My dad, James, died, and it was tough. It was really tough. To his dying day, I let him know that he was my dad. He knew he was my dad. Um, I didn't want to hurt him. He knew, I knew, because he said something one day to the fact of, why does everyone always want to take away what's mine? And when he said that, I knew exactly what he meant. But he passed away in June. And at that point, Hector started, he kept calling again. And when you're grieving and Hector kept trying to call me, it was kind of making me angry, because I'm like, let me grieve my dad. Let me do this without the other side of guilt coming in. Something along the lines there happened to my mom here, and my mom became ill too. And my mom was 10 years younger than my dad, and she became ill with some sort of an autoimmune disease that the doctors couldn't figure out. And only 5 months later, my mom died.
Oh, God, Jennifer.
Yeah, my mom died in August of 2019. No, excuse me, November. My mom died in 2019. And if you believe this, you can. If you don't, I don't blame you. But Hector died 2 weeks after my mom died.
Oh.
It was crazy. That year was the hardest year of my life. I have so many regrets. I never let Hector come here to California to meet my kids. He got to meet my daughter Karina and my husband, and everything he saw of my children was over social media or on FaceTime. But he didn't ever get a chance to come to California to meet my kids like he wanted. He was only 62 when he passed away. My mom was 67 when she died. And It was awful, but I don't know why it all happened like that. And it was like as if God needed me to know Hector first. And then everything came crumbling down. It was just the most bizarre chain of events that happened in 2019. But, I had to really become spiritually okay to understand that, I'll be able to see them again later on when I die. And that there was a reason that things, God has a reason for all of us. He has a purpose for all of us. And I just have to live my life knowing that there was a reason that things happened the way they did. I do regret, though, not letting him meet my children, because he's very similar to my oldest son. His mannerisms and my oldest boys, they just act so much alike. But I can't live in regret. I have to, I have to move forward with my life, and it's been tough. And I have to also remember that we had the pandemic hit.
Oh my God.
And if they would have all been sick during the pandemic, we wouldn't have been able to be at their bedside. We wouldn't have been able to be in the hospital when my mom was sick. And that's what I have to also be grateful for. If there's any silver lining, is like God took them before the pandemic, and we were able to be at their bedside.
I can't even imagine the sort of grief you're going through, have gone through, are going through, losing all three of your parents in such a short period of time. I'm so sorry for you.
Thank you. Yeah, it was tough. I have a wonderful, loving husband, Nick. He was there for me, and my daughters, my sons, all of my family was just there for me. Even my brothers, as much as they kind of just swept things under the rug, they were there for me. And they, well, of course we were there for each other when our parents died, but even supporting me when Hector passed away, when they found that out, because, I guess if you could say I had greater loss than all of us, it was awful. And that sounds selfish because we all suffer in different ways, but man, losing three was really tough. Really tough. So turns out I'm Puerto Rican and Filipino, and I'm J-Lo, like the other J-Lo, the Puerto Rican J-Lo.
Yes, I was going to say, you're Puerto Rican too.
Yeah, just like she is. And
what about your last name? You're Hispanic and Lopez's husband.
And my husband's Mexican.
Okay.
Yeah, he's Mexican. Okay. Mm-hmm. But it always made me wonder, did my mom, think about that when I married a guy with the last name Lopez? And, we all know J-Lo is Puerto Rican. If it's like it was God sending her little signals, look, your daughter's going to bring it out somehow or another. I have my sister in Georgia still, and we remain in contact. I had to let her know, hey, you're overwhelming me with all of your calls and your pictures and your FaceTiming. And she doesn't work. She didn't have to work. Her husband takes care of her. She doesn't work. I work, do family thing. We do all that stuff. And she was always free to do all, call and do all these things. And I was like, you got to slow down because you're overdoing it. But, people would say, look at where she's coming from. She is so eager to know more about you because you were the missing piece. You were their missing link. And I get that. I get that too.
But I'm glad you
Um,
brought that up because we've had a lot of people that have no contact with new family, and we have people that have,
mhm.
have a union with their new family. But it's been a while since anyone's talked about that overwhelming, almost burdened, how it can be too much with that. So
Yeah.
I know there's people nodding along with that. So I'm
Oh
glad you
yeah.
verbalized
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. It was much. And that was, I think it was more so too much because, I'm just battling the balance here, like I was trying to be there for my dad, trying to be there for my mom
Mm,
and not feel like I was betraying them, but then also trying to be excited about the new family that was found. And so it was just, I think trying to take it all on all at once was just like too much. And it made me just back out. I had to back down and I just didn't want to deal with it either way. I didn't want to have to hide anymore from my parents. I didn't want to have to, try to teach them everything about me from, who I was here, and that was sad because it was all love from Florida. It was all love from Florida and Georgia. They just wanted to know me and I, you know, it was just it was hard to try to be, I guess, rude. I guess I felt like I was being rude to them, like saying, "Hey, I
mhm.
can't take your calls. I'm busy." And it would hurt them. I think I hurt Hector a lot by not taking his calls when he just wanted just to be in my life. And then my sister, the same thing. I felt like I was hurting her too, but I honestly, it was like I was tired. It was very tiring trying to be both
Oh,
sides.
yeah. And I know that you are in some of the NPE Facebook groups, but if people wanted
Yes.
to contact you, what would be the best way they could do that?
Um. So you can find me on the NPE Facebook group, Nick Jennifer Lopez dash Postel, or you can reach me on my email at Jennifer Jennifer A Lopez Lopez number 7 at gmail.com.
I will put that in today's show notes as well. And thank you so much for sharing this today and telling me your whole story. I felt pretty sad for you there, finding out about. I didn't realize you had just lost your parents. I'm so sorry about that, but thank you for sharing where you are at today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. It was tough going through the story again. People that know me, gosh, their hearts always go out to me, and I don't look for sympathy. It's just, I like I said, I did endure a lot, but I do have faith that there was a reason that I got to meet him just before he passed, and just before it was just turmoil. But I'm grateful for what I got.
These stories are here for us to identify with. If you are an NPE and would like to share your story, email npestories@gmail.com. You do not have to give any identifying information. If you are an NPE and would like to share your story, I'd like to hear from you. Subscribe to this podcast to hear more. Come heal with us.